Across oceans of time, a river waits, ancient, patient, eternal. It remembers names the wind has forgotten and stories the earth once held close. From British shores to Indian Ghats, love travels as ash, faith, and farewell. Because even in death, home is never forgotten, only rediscovered. There are rivers that flow through land, and then there are rivers that flow through time. The Ganges has carried the weight of countless prayers, empires, and memories. To millions, she is not just water but eternity in motion, forgiveness shaped into form. Her currents cradle the hopes of generations, a sacred thread tying heaven and earth. For Hindus, she is mother, purifier, and witness, the river that never forgets the footsteps that reach her shore. Each ripple of her surface whispers a name once spoken. Each wave carries the grief and grace of another farewell. She has seen kingdoms rise and fall, yet her waters remain unchanged, cleansing more than bodies, cleansing the soul of all who come to her. For the British Indian who stands far from her banks, she represents more than faith. She is belonging that flows without end. The Ganges remembers what the world forgets, and in her depths, love is never lost, only carried home. Thousands of miles away, in quiet homes across Britain, urns rest on mantles waiting for one final journey. Some are wrapped in silk, others in plain cloth, but all are guarded with reverence, like time capsules of memory. Families whisper prayers as they prepare the passage from cold English skies to the warmth of the Indian dawn. Each urn holds not just ashes, but stories, laughter once shared, lessons once taught, and the promise once made. Take me home. The journey is long, measured not in miles, but in meaning. At Heathrow, as the urn passes through security, the hum of the terminal feels like a modern echo of ancient rituals. And when the plane finally touches the Indian soil, the air itself seems to shift, heavier with memory, lighter with peace. What travels in those containers is more than what remains of a body. It is the journey of return, the soul retracing invisible routes across oceans. In this final migration, death becomes a bridge, carrying love back to where it first began. British Indians live in a dual rhythm, one foot in the west, one heartbeat in the east. Their mornings begin with tea and tabloids, their evenings with incense and hymns. They walk the pavements of London but dream in the colors of India. Between these two worlds, identity becomes not a choice but a balance, an art of belonging to both without betraying either. Even in silence, their lives echo with two languages, two cultures, two callings. And when death arrives, it does not choose a side. It whispers instead, both are yours. In crematoriums built of British brick, rituals unfold that were once performed on Indian soil. The priest chants in Sanskrit as English rain falls outside, a moment where empire and eternity meet. In that mingling of sound and silence, the soul hovers between worlds, unsure where home truly is. Yet perhaps that uncertainty is the answer itself, that home is not geography, but memory. From Heathrow to Haridwar, the journey begins, not of the living, but of what remains. Inside a sealed urn, ashes rest like quiet echoes of a life once vibrant. Airport corridors, customs lines, and flight manifests become part of a sacred procession. In the hold of a plane soaring above continents, the ashes travel through clouds and memories, tracing the invisible route between two homes. Each mile is more than distance. It is devotion measured in air and faith. When the urn lands in India, dawn is breaking. The Ganges waits, silent but knowing. Families carry it gently, as if still holding the person they loved. At customs, forms are stamped, questions asked, but no one can quantify what's truly being returned. For what the urn holds cannot be weighed in kilograms or declared at counters. It holds longing, closure, and the unbroken thread of ancestry. In that crossing from gray London skies to golden Indian light, something unseen completes its circle, a soul finding the current that has always called its name. In the heart of India flows not a river, but a divinity, Ganga, the eternal mother. Her waters are said to descend from heaven, carrying forgiveness in every ripple, redemption in every tide. To the Hindu soul, she is not merely a stream of water. She is the bridge between the mortal and the infinite. Her currents cradle the stories of kings and beggars alike, dissolving the boundaries of class, creed, and time. To rest in her embrace is not an end, it is liberation. For when ashes meet her waves, the soul is said to awaken, free at last from the endless turning of life and death. But the Ganges is more than myth, she is memory, a living presence that listens, cleanses, and endures. Her rhythm is prayer, her silence, benediction. To the families who journey across continents, she is not a foreign shore, but the echo of home. In her waters, generations find release, not of grief, but of gratitude. For every handful of ash that dissolves into her flow becomes a whisper carried toward eternity, a final promise kept. And in that quiet surrender, faith finds its proof, not in sight, but in the unseen mercy of her depths. Some call it superstition, others call it science beyond measure. But to those who have stood by the Ganges at dawn, watching ashes merge with mist, it feels like something deeper, the universe exhaling. The ritual is more than belief. It is a conversation between matter and spirit. Science may say the body returns to elements, but faith says the soul returns to light. In that union of logic and devotion lies the quiet brilliance of tradition, an understanding that not everything sacred needs explanation. At the river's edge, scientists may see evaporation and flow, but families see release. The current becomes both symbol and proof that endings are transformations, not disappearances. For centuries, the Ganges has carried not only carbon and clay, but the invisible weight of memory. Faith, in its truest form, is not blindness, it's trust refined by time. To watch the ashes fade is to witness life completing its equation, from dust to devotion, from form to freedom. And in that moment, both skeptic and believer stand equal, silent, humbled, and aware that beneath all knowledge, there is mystery. They were born under gray skies, raised on British soil, speaking English before any ancestral tongue. Yet, when the urn is placed in their hands, something ancient stirs, a pulse that beats with memories not their own. These are the children of migration, carrying two worlds in their breath. They've never walked the ghats of Varanasi, never felt the monsoon mist on their skin, yet when they speak of India, their eyes soften, as if remembering a place they've never been but always belonged to. The ritual, for them, is not about returning ashes, it's about returning identity. When they stand by the Ganges, the scent of incense rising with the sun, something wordless passes between them and the water. They see what their grandparents saw, feel what their parents felt, the quiet ache of belonging. In that moment, distance dissolves. The past no longer feels far away. It feels alive, humming beneath their ribs. They realize this act is more than tradition, it's inheritance. Through the ashes, they reconnect to a lineage of love and loss, carried across oceans but never forgotten. The river doesn't ask where they were born, it welcomes them as if they never left. At the ghats of Varanasi, dawn arrives softly, a golden hush over the river where smoke, mist, and memory intertwine. Sons and daughters kneel by the water, trembling as they open the urn. The ashes fall slowly, dancing on the surface before vanishing beneath. It is not just a ritual, it is a release, the final breath of love returning to where life began. Every handful carries stories untold, promises unspoken, moments remembered only by the heart. In that fragile act, grief transforms into grace. The living let go, and in doing so, they keep the departed alive in a gentler form. Around them, the river moves without haste, as if understanding the weight it carries. Priests murmur ancient prayers, the air thick with sandalwood and devotion. Time feels suspended, the boundary between here and beyond quietly dissolving. Some cry, others simply watch, their silence speaking louder than any scripture. For a fleeting instant, all pain is purified by the rhythm of flowing water. The Ganges accepts without judgment, without end. When the ashes disappear, they do not sink, they journey. And in that journey, the living find something deeper than farewell, the peace of knowing nothing truly leaves. When the ashes disappear into the rippling water, sound itself seems to bow in reverence. The air thickens with something unsaid, something ancient, as if the world momentarily pauses to honor what is past. In that stillness, time loses meaning. The families, standing by the river's edge, feel a hush that is both heavy and holy, a quiet that holds every goodbye ever whispered across generations. There are no speeches, no grand gestures, only breath and memory, the faint rustle of the current carrying away what words cannot hold. And then comes the realization that silence is not absence, but presence in its purest form. The river speaks without sound, its rhythm echoing through the hearts of those who watch. Each ripple becomes a syllable of eternity, each shimmer a reminder that endings are only beginnings wearing different names. As the last trace of ash blends into the horizon, peace arrives, not loud or triumphant, but soft, like the sigh of a soul finally finding rest. The silence that follows is not emptiness. It is completion, a sacred calm that says, what was loved will never truly be lost. Back in London, beneath gray skies and quiet rivers, some choose the Thames, a gesture of faith adapted to distance. They whisper prayers into the wind, believing the divine is not bound by geography, that water anywhere can carry a soul home. Their ceremonies are gentle, simple, unadorned, shaped by modern life, yet still pulsing with memory. The ashes dissolve into the cold current, mingling with rain, with fog, with everything unspoken between generations. In that moment, the city's hum fades, replaced by the soft dialogue between belief and belonging. And yet, even they confess, something about the Ganges feels different. It carries an age the Thames cannot imitate, a warmth that speaks in the language of eternity. The river in India feels alive, not merely as water, but as witness, a flowing scripture written by countless farewells. To immerse ashes in her depths is to complete a circle too sacred for words. Between faith and flight, between here and there, every choice is both compromise and devotion. Whether in London's chill or India's dawn, what matters is not the river, but the love that flows through it, endless, remembering, divine. Some call it superstition, a ritual carried by habit, repeated without question. Others see it as duty, a quiet act of love that threads the living to the lost. For families across generations, this ritual becomes the final bridge, a way to honor those who came before while teaching those who remain what remembrance truly means. The urn in their hands holds not just ashes, but lineage, names, faces, stories that refuse to fade. To scatter those remains into sacred waters is to say, we remember, we continue, we belong. Continuity is not about imitation, it is about inheritance, the kind that breathes through devotion, not instruction. In that act, time bends, the past and present folding together like prayer. Children who never met their grandparents weep for them as if they had, because the ritual makes memory tangible. What began as religion becomes legacy, a living language spoken through hands and water. And in that sacred exchange, grief softens into gratitude. The ashes vanish, but something stays, a thread of faith that endures beyond death, binding generations in silence, in reverence, in love that refuses to end. The journey of ashes from Britain to India is not measured in miles, but in meaning. Behind every shipment lies a tangle of forms, embassy stamps, and cautious hands, each signature a quiet vow to complete what love began. Families wait weeks, sometimes months, for permission to send what their hearts have already released. Yet no one complains, because this is not a transaction. It is a pilgrimage made through patience. Each delay becomes part of the ritual, a test of devotion that money cannot quantify. For many, this is the final act of service, to ensure that their loved one's spirit finds its rightful rest. They spend not out of duty, but out of reverence, knowing that devotion sometimes wears the face of bureaucracy. When the urn finally leaves their home, it carries more than ashes. It carries memory wrapped in persistence. The cost is not counted in pounds, but in emotion, in the quiet tears shed at airports, in the trembling hands that sign the final paper. Because love, when translated across oceans, always demands effort. And for those who remember, no price is ever too high for peace. When the ashes meet the Ganges, something shifts, not just in the air, but in the heart. The rippling water folds them gently, as if the river herself recognizes the long journey they've made. Families watch in silence, the moment too sacred for words, too ancient for explanation. What was once separation now becomes reunion. The living and the departed bound again in the language of water and memory. The circle that migration once fractured is mended, quietly, completely. For many, this is not simply a ritual, it is reconciliation. The act of release becomes a homecoming for both soul and spirit, a soft merging of history and hope. As the ashes disappear beneath the surface, so does the ache of distance, the grief transformed into grace. In that golden light, where mist and prayer intertwine, the families feel something beyond closure, belonging. It is as though the Ganges whispers, "You are home now." And in that moment, every mile crossed, every tear shed, every silence endured finds its meaning. The river accepts, the heart exhales, and the journey ends, not in sorrow, but in peace. They say the Ganges listens, not with ears, but with eternity. Every name spoken on her banks, every tear that falls into her flow, becomes part of her memory. She carries those syllables like sacred seeds, letting them drift through centuries, unforgotten. For the families who return generation after generation, it is not just ritual, it is remembrance. Each offering of ashes, each whispered prayer, becomes a dialogue between the mortal and the divine, between time and timelessness. The river does not merely receive, she remembers. Perhaps that is why they come back, not for closure, but for connection, to remind the Ganges of who they are, and in doing so, to remind themselves. The water that once touched their ancestors now cradles their loved ones again, uniting past and present in one endless current. Here, memory does not fade, it flows. And in the soft murmur of waves against the Ghats, they hear something eternal, a whisper that promises that names, like souls, never truly disappear. The river holds them all, patiently, faithfully, a keeper of legacies, a witness to love that refuses to be forgotten. In Leicester, Southall, and Wembley, India breathes through brick and mist. The air hums with the scent of incense, turmeric, and cardamom, a quiet symphony of memory preserved through migration. Temples glow beside curry houses, and shopfronts shimmer with saris that catch the same light once seen in Delhi's bazaars. These are not just neighborhoods, they are living echoes of a homeland carried across oceans. Here, the faithful bow before deities wrapped in garlands, chanting prayers older than the streets beneath them. It is India reborn in exile, vibrant, rhythmic, enduring. Yet, when the time comes for the final farewell, these recreated worlds fall silent. For even amid devotion and diaspora, the last act of release still belongs to a river far away. No temple pool or city canal can replace the pull of the Ganges. Her waters are more than symbolic, they are ancestral. The British Ghat is a beginning, not an ending. And so, families board planes with urns in hand, crossing borders once more, not to escape, but to return. Because some journeys can only end where they began, in the arms of a river that still remembers their name. In a world driven by urgency, emails, deadlines, flights, and fluorescent lights, faith feels like resistance. British Indians live between two tempos, the pulse of modern life and the heartbeat of ancient ritual. Their world runs on algorithms, but their souls remember hymns. While the West speaks of progress measured in speed, they hold on to something quieter, the slow grace of remembrance. Every ritual, every chant, every folded hand becomes an act of defiance against forgetting. In a society obsessed with efficiency, they choose meaning over momentum. The ashes that cross oceans are not outdated traditions, they are anchors. Each act of devotion connects generations who refuse to let memory be deleted by modernity's updates. The flight carrying an urn to India is more than travel. It's time travel, a bridge between iPhones and incense, Wi-Fi, and the whisper of prayer. For them, ritual is not nostalgia, it's relevance. It reminds a scattered people that identity cannot be downloaded or digitized. In the glow of a smartphone, they still see the light of the sacred flame. Between faith and modernity, they do not choose, they balance. And in that balance, they remain whole. Every urn that touches her waters carries a silence louder than words. The Ganges does not question who they were, where they lived, or what passports they held. She simply receives ashes, prayers, and the invisible ache of distance. For centuries, she has been the witness to human impermanence, watching generations dissolve into her current like whispers returning to the source. Her ripples are memory, her flow is forgiveness. Each family that comes to her banks adds another verse to a song that began before history learned to write. The river does not forget. She holds in her depths the traces of countless lives, scattered by those who crossed oceans yet never left home. To her, these ashes are not remains, they are returns. The Ganges becomes both the final listener and the eternal storyteller, carrying tales of love, loss, and longing downstream. In her vast silence, she absorbs migration's sorrow and transforms it into continuity. The families leave, but she remains, carrying their essence toward the sea, the great union of all waters, where every story, every soul, and every farewell finally becomes one. They stand at the edge of two worlds, one built of logic, one made of longing. The younger British Indians, born beneath gray skies and raised in digital light, ask what the river truly means. Why send ashes across oceans? Why not honor the departed here, in the land that shaped their lives? To them, the ritual feels distant, a whisper from an ancestry they never lived, but somehow still carry in their blood. Yet when they watch their parents, faces softened by memory, standing at the Ganges with trembling hands, something shifts. Words dissolve into silence, and questions melt into understanding. It is not about where the body rests, but where the spirit feels at peace. In that moment, they see, this is more than tradition. It is a bridge of belonging, a language older than speech. The river does not ask for belief, she only asks for witness. And as the ashes disappear into her golden surface, the young no longer seek explanations. They understand that some emotions are not meant to be analyzed, only felt, deeply, as the soul recognizes the echo of home. For those who believe, the Ganges is more than a river. She is release itself. To immerse ashes in her current is to free the soul from the endless cycle of rebirth, granting moksha, the quiet liberation from all earthly weight. To the skeptics, she offers something gentler, peace, a stillness that arrives when the living realize that love and loss are not opposites, but reflections of each other. As the ashes drift away, carried by the same current that has borne prayers for centuries, time feels suspended. The mourners stand silent, their grief dissolving into the mist like breath meeting dawn. The air hums with something wordless, a vibration of forgiveness, of acceptance. Even those who came uncertain leave with softened hearts, touched by the sense that endings can be kind. The river takes what is given, not as loss, but as return. For in her depth, there is no death, only transformation. Life folds back into life, dust into water, sorrow into serenity. And as the sun rises over her golden expanse, one truth lingers. Liberation is not an ending. It is a homecoming written in water. In the quiet that follows the journey, when the urn is emptied and the river carries its secret away, there is a peace that no language can hold. The ritual, often mistaken for farewell, is in truth a return to where it all began. Every ripple that spreads across the Ganges seems to whisper that life was never meant to end, only to change form, to flow endlessly between here and beyond. For British Indians, this final act is not a rejection of the land they live in, but an embrace of where their story began. Across oceans and generations, the pull of the Ganges remains, ancient, unbroken, maternal. As the sun dips behind the Ghats and the smoke of incense curls into the sky, the living feel something loosen within them, not sorrow, but gratitude. They have completed a promise, not to tradition alone, but to belonging. The river receives what the earth once held, and in doing so, restores balance between both worlds. The last ritual is not about letting go, it is about coming home. For even after lifetimes apart, the soul always finds its way back to the water that first named it. The story of British Indians sending ashes to the Ganges is not just about death, it's about memory, roots, and return. The river carries more than ashes, it carries identity across time. This is AfterTime, where stories flow beyond borders. Like, subscribe, and share to keep the echoes alive.